Hey there, guitar fanatics. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about something that every single guitar player who's ever wanted to solo or improvise is either going through or has gone through. And that's being able to take something you're learning like scales and arpeggios and actually turn them into something that sounds cool and interesting and not like you're regurgitating an exercise or aimlessly noodling. So I'm going to talk to you about note choices, about tension and resolution in music. We'll get into some phrasing ideas. Basically, I'm going to give you some good information that's going to help you make a huge leap in your ability to turn scales and patterns into legit guitar soloing ideas. By the way, I've got an extensive course on mastering soloing ideas in the blues realm. So if you want to check that out and support the channel, I'll put a link in the description down below. I'll also put a link below where you can grab the diagrams from the video and the backing track. Do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm Charlie Long. Let's play some guitar. So I can remember it like yesterday, the first time I went to a real jam session. I was a freshman in high school. I knew a lot of even complex chords and I knew a few scales, but I hadn't really worked on soloing much. There were some older guys there and they were playing ZZ Top, stuff like that. A couple of the guys knew some pretty decent rock licks and they did some soloing and they pointed at me and said, "Go dude, rock out." And over this kind of thing, I probably did some sort of aimless noodling like. I remember the concept of playing anything that was actually cool was a total mystery. My teacher had given me some scales but didn't really tell me what to do with them other than learn them. My buddies would show me a pentatonic pattern and then say something completely meaningless like, "Dude, just play what you feel." I distinctly remember thinking there's gotta be a better way. There's got to be a process you can follow to come up with ideas for licks and phrases. Over the years, I've gotten a lot of great ideas from some teachers and other players, and I developed a lot of my own ideas through trial, error, and experimentation. Hopefully, some of the things that we talk about today are going to shorten your learning curve, and you can start having more fun and success with your lead playing in short order. So one of the best ways to get ideas for your lead playing is to learn some licks by your favorite guitarists. There's so much you can learn from great players. But at some point you have to start coming up with your own stuff because there's only so many licks you can memorize, right? So how do we go about coming up with our own stuff? Well, let's get into the process of taking the major scale, good old do, re, mi, and using specific parts of it to write guitar licks that sound amazing. So we're not going to get deep into theory today, but I do think we need to take a quick look at the major scale and understand a few things. And when I say understand, I think that the three things that we're going to talk about are fundamental and critical. And those three concepts are, number one, identifying chord tones, the notes from a scale that make up the chords that we're playing over. Number two, understanding the relationship of non-chord tones or the other notes in the scale to the chords that we're playing over. And number three, mixing chord tones, which sound very solid and stable and what we might call consonant, with non-chord tones, which sound less stable and what we might call dissonant, and how that creates tension and resolution. Tension and resolution, moving from non-chord tones to chord tones, is what gives music its movement and its momentum. It's a big part of what creates emotion in music. And if we can play guitar solos that move people emotionally, what more can we ask for, right? So let's take a really simple chord progression in the key of E. E is a great key for guitar players, right? So the chords we're going to play over, we've got E major, C sharp minor, F sharp minor, and B. So now that we've got our chord progression, let's look at the E major scale and identify some chord tones. So here's a 2-octave E major pattern. You can see it has the notes E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, and D sharp. And we can also refer to each of these notes by the number order that they fall in the scale, so 1, 2, 3, and so on. And you may hear me refer to some of those interval numbers as we go through here also. So if you don't know this, we make basic chords by starting on a note and playing every other note. For instance, if we start on the E, skip over F sharp and then add G sharp, skip over the A and add B, we get an E major triad. Now, we want to recognize that the third note from E, the G sharp, is 4 frets or 2 whole steps above the E. And we call that a major third. So very simply, if you have a major third, it's going to be a major chord. And those notes, E, G sharp, and B, we call those the chord tones of E major. And those notes also make up what we call an E major triad arpeggio. And we can find those notes all over the neck with various triad shapes. And I've done multiple lessons on those, by the way. You should check those out. And we can also do that with C sharp minor. If we start on the C sharp, skip the D sharp and play E, we notice that the E is only 3 frets above the C. And we're going to call that a minor third. And we know we're going to have a minor chord now. So we skip over F sharp and we play G sharp. And those are the chord tones of C sharp minor. C sharp, E, and G sharp. You can find those notes all over the fretboard and the shapes also. Next we've got F sharp minor, and starting on the F sharp, we would skip G sharp and play A, skip B and play C sharp, and of course we can find those all over the neck. Lastly, we've got B. Skipping C sharp and playing D sharp, we're going to skip the E and play F sharp, and that gives us a B major triad. And of course, we can find that shape all over the neck. So let's play a little bit over our chord progression. To keep things as simple as possible, we're just going to play the notes of the triads on the first 2 strings. The way we're going to do that is we're going to start on each of the 3 chord tones and play the other 2 notes of the arpeggio. For instance, there's 3 shapes or inversion for the E major triad. So we've got, starting out, we've got E and G sharp on the 5th and 9th frets of the B string, and then a B on the 7th fret of the E string. We can then play G sharp and B at frets 9 and 12 of the B string, and then E at the 12th fret of the B string. And then lastly, we can start on the B at the 12th fret of the B string, and then play E and G sharp at frets 12 and 16 of the E string. Now, if we string those together over an E chord, we've already got something that sounds pretty musical. Now, we can do that with each chord in the progression, with the C sharp minor starting first on C sharp. We've got C sharp, E, and G sharp. Then we've got E, G sharp, C sharp. Lastly, we'd have G sharp, C sharp, and E. F sharp minor, we'd have F sharp, A, C sharp. Then we'd have A, C sharp, F sharp, and then C sharp, F sharp, and A. And lastly for our B, we're going to have to move around the neck because I'm going to run out of frets, but we'd have B, D sharp, F sharp, D sharp, F sharp, B, F sharp, B, D sharp. So those are some triad shapes in all 3 of what we call inversions on the first 2 strings. They match our chord progression. So let's run through the progression a couple of times and string together those inversions over it. So we're already making music. And just playing the chord tones sounds infinitely better than the pointless noodling I did when I first started trying to solo. But while using chord tones sounds correct, it sounds almost too stable, too plain, and too boring. So we need to find a way to introduce some tension and excitement into the sound. So the way we're going to do that is, and I mentioned it earlier, we're going to start adding non-chord tones into our triads. I call this first concept Triad plus one, and it's another topic I've done videos on. You hear these kinds of phrases in so many famous solos. It's a great way to start building melodies. So let's start with our E, our root form. We had E, G sharp, and B, and what we're going to do, we're going to add the note in between E and G sharp. That's F sharp. So that would sound like this. That first inversion where we started on the G sharp, so we had G sharp, B, and E, we're going to add the note between G sharp and B, so that's A. So now that first inversion would sound like this. The second inversion, let's add the note after the B, so that's C sharp, then we'd have E in G sharp. For the sake of time, I'm just going to play the root form of our other arpeggios, and I'm going to add that one non-chord tone. So we had our C sharp minor triad with C sharp, E, and G sharp. Let's add D sharp in there. With F sharp minor, we had F sharp, A, and C sharp. We're going to add G sharp in there. And then we had our B triad with B, D sharp, and F sharp. We're going to add C sharp in there. So those four little patterns would now sound like this. And with just a little creativity, we could create this kind of a sound. So let's level up here and add another non-chord tone to what we've got so far. We're going to put another note on top of the triad plus ones that we just played. So for E major, we're going to play E, F sharp, G sharp, B, and now C sharp. C sharp minor, we're going to play C sharp, D sharp, E, G sharp, and now A. F sharp minor, we're going to play F sharp, G sharp, A, C sharp, and now D sharp. For B, we're going to play B, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and now G sharp. And with those 5 notes, you heard me making up little patterns like this. Let's level up one more time and add a 6th note. So we're going to be playing 6-note patterns on the E and B strings. So let's start with our E major triad, which was made up of E, G sharp, and B. Well, now we're going to play E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp. So if we move up to the G sharp, we'd have this pattern. And if we go up and start on our B, we'd have this pattern. And of course, we can play these 6-note shapes with all of our chords. Here's C sharp minor. Here's F sharp minor. And here's B major. And again, resorting to our creativity, messing around with the order of the notes a little bit and adding some phrasing, we could get something like this. There's so much you can do with this type of a fingering pattern. You could even practice getting them up to speed and doing shreddy stuff like this. Now I'm going to play along with a backing track one more time. I'm going to mix up the strategies that we've talked about today and see if I can't come up with something that sounds pretty good. One last practice tip. These shapes are movable all over the neck. All you have to do is find the same starting note. For instance, take our 6-note pattern that starts on the E note. We started it on the E at the 5th fret of the 2nd string. But I can play it anywhere I can find an E note. So after you get comfortable playing these shapes on the E and B string, move them all over the neck. For instance, I can play it on the open E. E at the 12th fret of the low E string. E at the 5th fret of the A string. E at the 2nd fret of the D string. E at the 9th fret of the G string. So after you get comfortable playing these shapes on the E and B string, make sure you're moving them all over the neck. Now, after that, as I always recommend with everything I teach, you've got to play all of these shapes in every key. It's just something you have to buckle down and spend the time on. So now, I hope you have more ideas on how to build guitar licks than you know what to do with. You're only going to be limited by your imagination and how much time you spend practicing, so get out there and get busy. Thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as I always say, work hard, play hard, have lots of fun, and never stop learning. See you soon.